Hello and welcome to Let's Get Real, Perspectives on Canadian Fundraising. I'm Lisa McDonald, the editor of Hillborn Charity E-News, here with Ed Sluga of PG Growth.
Yeah,
And things are a little different today, Ed. We
just
have
us, just us
it's
today. Yes.
it's just us, no third person in on the conversation. But you know what? This is going to be kind of fun. I like us
Yeah.
just having a chat.
Yeah, I think the thing about it too is obviously you and I are this when we're recording this, is the week of the Canadian Association of Gift Planners. We're going to both be there. It's going to be great to see you in person. That happens 2 or 3 times a year. Normally, we're connecting in this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a busy time, right? We all know that it's such a busy time in our business. I'm sure, I don't know, is it harder to get folks to contribute to Charity E-News at this time of the year? I always think of March, April, May is just so crazy. How is it for you on the editorial side as you're doing all of that work?
That's a good question. I think people around this time of year are in a rhythm. It is busy, but they're on it, they're working. And so as long as communication is open and flowing between myself and all of our different contributors and thought leaders who write for Charity E-News, what I find is that we just need a bit of a longer tail in the planning. So I'm not trying to turn articles around from people in, a week or two. It's like we're planning on a 6 week horizon, gives, a lot of time to prepare. And that seems to work well for both them and I. But definitely, there is a cycle, there is a pace to it all. It's more difficult generally around summertime, actually, because everyone just slows down and is trying to reduce workload.
Yeah, and just to stick on that for a minute. I mean, one of the things that I'm finding, and I'm sure everyone is finding this is no great revelation. It's not something I'm bringing to the table. I'm sure you're seeing it too. Is you're getting people with more openness to providing thoughts, providing opinion, providing insight, just because it's a thing right now. I'm not saying people are trying to be influencers or trying to do that, but what's modeled out there is if you have a thought about a particular issue in the world that you reside in or work within, you're happy to provide a little bit of insight. And so I do know you're getting people, I would suggest, from all over the country, from all various kind of backgrounds all over. Is it, just I'm curious more than anything else. Is it easier to have that diverse, voice appear from almost anywhere, given the nature of the way things work nowadays?
I think so. I would actually say yes. And I mean, I do try to invite people to contribute to the conversation at Charity E-News from different experiences and frameworks and points of view. People who are new to the profession, people who are definitely leadership in the profession. And because I think there is something to share from everyone, within those experiences. I do like a geographic kind of
Mhm.
representation because sometimes what's happening in the West is different than what charities are dealing with in the East and then, the big centers. So I like balance there. So it's interesting, but I think on the whole, people are very interested in engaging in conversations. And the only blocker may be their comfort level with writing, for example, because not everyone loves to write. But there again, Ed, there are things like AI and other tools coming more and more to the fore that are helping people who maybe aren't as comfortable with getting that first draft out to figure out a way to get their ideas in some kind of form for others to kind of take in and share.
Yeah, and I think obviously you said we're going to approach this a little bit differently today, so I'm going to take a moment to set it up because I'm the one who's driving this forward. But love to have your thoughts along the way because I know how much work you've done with Charity E-News on the whole notion of AI. And
Mhm.
so you've got lots of thoughts about it. You've done a lot of reading about it. You've engaged with a lot of those diverse voices from the sector around
Mhm.
AI and what's it going to mean for us. And this popped up because of the CAGP that's coming up. Because what I do think about this, and you've so sorry, before I dive into that, what I'd like to do is kind of go over AI itself and how this is going to, from my point of view, but also, from your point of view, how it's going to actually be a positive for charities if we approach it correctly. And give some logic around that, but love to hear your thought process around that. So just to give you a sense of where I'm coming from, it
Mhm.
is prompted by the CAGP. And I'll just give you one of those kind of Ed sort of 3 minutes on some theory here, and
I'm
which is,
listening.
yeah, I mean, fundraising is done in lots of different ways, and there's one that's considered to be that sort of mass marketing fundraising. We know what that is, events across the country or even in your local community. It's a mass marketing. Anybody can come. Anybody is engaged. Direct mail, digital, social, those sorts of things, mass activities. But there's also that fundraising activity, like direct person-to-person contact. And I always think that the CAGP, or when I got involved with the CAGP, it was the place that people kind of moved toward. There was this kind of almost, a linear notion of what the journey of your career would be. You got in, and a good example of this is I recently went to the funeral of Ken Mayhew, someone we've mentioned here a number of times, and there was a retelling in the service honoring Ken about his career. And where did he start? He started at the MS Society, jump rope for heart,
Yeah.
which is like mass, out there, big event across the country, that sort of thing. And his last position, he was one of the most important hospital CEO fundraisers in the Greater Toronto area, raising $10 million gifts plus, personal one-on-one. I always thought of a career was kind of like that. You got in early, you did this kind of mass marketing, and slowly, if you stuck with fundraising, after 30 plus years, you'd end up doing one-on-one fundraising, and plan giving is about that, right? So it
Mhm.
made me think about AI. So, and what's that going to mean for fundraising? So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but put it in the context of what likely will happen in other areas of AI, or how AI will affect other areas. And you said something which was really interesting. You called it a tool, right? And you probably are seeing that tool being used in some of the work that you're seeing. It's not someone's doesn't have the opinion, or that they don't have the logic behind their opinion. And examples of what's feeding the logic behind their opinion is that they might be utilizing AI to bring their thoughts together, right? Now, one way or the other. And AI is going to help lots of fundraisers as a tool. For example, proposal writing is going to become faster, right?
Mhm.
We know that, and we accept that. We really do accept that. And that's really a practical way of doing that, right? Of segmenting, being able to find those donors who are planned giving prospects. How are we
Mhm.
going to be able to do that? That'll happen. And engagement and management of data overall. A tool it'll be really a wonderful tool for that. And I would suggest that that's going to be the same thing in the for-profit sector as well, right? But I do think in the for-profit sector, that there'll likely be an impetus to do a little bit more. And one of the key elements and we've talked about the charitable world, many of these podcasts, but also just between the two of us, right? Or in larger group settings. What's it mean to be a charity? What's your mission in the world, and how do you conduct yourself? So we'll just put that aside. When you're a for-profit organization, you've got one mission, which is to make a profit. The bigger the profit, the better. And I do think that there will be a reflex on in the for-profit sector to make AI more than a tool. It's going to be a replacement for folks where I think there's a fear there. And I do think that we're seeing that fear in the not-for-profit sector or the charitable sector as well. And I know that I won't turn it over to you. I know that you've seen that in some of the writing that has come into um, into Charity e-news, that there is an acknowledgement this could be a strong tool, but there's also a feeling that this could disrupt the way charities normally interact with donors. And you've seen that over the time last few years. I think more the last few months, and so that's something you were seeing as well. Am I right to say that?
Um, I may have lost the thread a little bit there, Ed.
Okay.
Um, but about disruption, and the fear around, being replaced. I think AI has definitely fostered a lot of fear, and it's across
So tell
sectors.
me about the fear, and that's really what I was after. And maybe I
That's
did it
what.
a roundabout way, but tell me about the fear that you're seeing in that writing and talking to folks.
Yeah, I think at the bottom line, it's fear of people losing their jobs. I think that's the number one fear, is that whole idea of being replaced, and that technology is taking the human out of the process. And I think certainly there are instances where that will happen. Things will become automated. It can be done faster through the processing of artificial intelligence than, hiring four guys to program it out, for example, like computer programming, things like that. But I think if we get back to kind of what the is at the heart of fundraising and philanthropy, and it's about building relationships, and I think that if when we have those kind of conversations, that AI does not replace relationship building. They are not going to connect with donors in a way that will make them feel moved to give, or move to create a legacy. That it's going to be about, um, I feel like the framing for the nonprofit sector around AI really has to look at the fact that we've been resource strapped for so long, and we're always kind of behind the eight ball. Never enough staff, never enough money, never enough of whatever to do what it is we're trying to do, because all the money is going to the delivery of the philanthropic service. I think when people kind of root down into that, then they can start to look at AI as more about building capacity in the instance of what we're trying to do. And I'm not being naive. I know that AI is definitely a disruptor to the way things have been done for a long time. And it's happened before, but I think not to this extent. And I think a lot of people still don't understand what that's going to look like. But in the here and now, I think that um, people need to get past that initial fear of change and disruption, and fear of, losing our jobs, and really double down on how to make it work, for the betterment of what we're trying to accomplish. It can help us hit our goals and be more effective.
Yeah, and I think you're touching on, again, in the context of the CHP conference, in the context of that personal touch, what I'm trying to get at here, and why I think charities have to position themselves now to do exactly what you're talking about. First off, don't be fearful, right?
Mhm.
If it's a tool to make your job easier to do and more efficient to do, then let's not be fearful of it.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm going to jump in here on
yeah.
that point just to add to it, because when people feel like they have too much work on their plate to begin with, there is a built-in resistance to adding anything new. Combine that with adding a new technology that
Hmm.
maybe you're comfortable with or have really any understanding of how to make it work, then the barrier becomes even higher and bigger, you know. And a lot of the people who are writing in this space for people working in the sector, are really advocating small steps to begin. Like, you don't have to start with the whole suite of understanding about what AI can do. You don't have to bring it in and take care of all of your data management for you if that just feels like too big. There are ways, there are entry points to start incorporating it and to empower your staff to start incorporating it, that leadership can, lead and advocate for and get past their own kind of maybe feelings of not knowing enough about it or lack of knowledge and things like that. So fear is tied into so many elements about how the culture that you're creating, and what are you advocating for within your organization in terms of bringing it in. So fear is part one, and then it if you don't overcome it, it's all these other things, right?
Yeah, I agree, and I think, that's why I think that there's a moment for charities to understand, and this is a leadership decision, where there's going to be a push, I believe, to utilize those tools, even in the face of that fear that you're talking about, right? Pushing those tools uh, to be used to a greater degree in the great service of efficiency and cost cutting. I think that there's actually a different decision to be made.
Well,
And
let's be clear, we're already behind the eight ball, right? Like, in the for-profit sector, they have been using AI for probably a decade. In smaller ways, bigger organizations, like, we're already behind, as we generally always are. We're still wrapping our heads around basic digital kind of fluency, and cross channel marketing and all these kind of things. And people are saying, and now you want us to use AI? Like, how, it's making people's heads pop off their necks. But we can't we can't sit this one out, folks. Like,
no, we can't. And again, but I think putting it in the context of it's a tool,
yeah,
and that's okay, right?
yeah.
I'll tell you a story about this, and there's two things that popped up last week that made me want to talk about this, and again, also because the CAGP is coming down the pipe for us. And one was the idea of AI, and obviously in the world of creativity, and that's what a lot of fundraisers are. They're creative people, that they're entrepreneurial, and you know many years ago in a different life when I was working in publications, I was actually one of the few people in the region I was working in at the time that understood computer pagination and understood some of the new platforms on Macintosh computers, right, to lay out a newspaper, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I was free of full-time employment. I was working, but I was able to do a contract on the side, which was not possible for lots of folks. So I was hired to come in to use AI, which is essentially what it is, machine learning, right? To bring in, and it was going to be a tool, and they were going to be able to lay out this daily newspaper and replace 20 people who were doing it every night with three.
Right.
Okay, I get that. There's a fear there, and that's our fear. But I wanted to say that that's in the context of, well, that was in the context of a dying media, print journalism, which we know. I mean, when I started working with Jim Hilborn, who started Charity E News,
Mm-hmm.
he was doing Canadian Fundraiser as a newsletter, mailed it out every week. I remember
It
working in
was
the
like,
office.
what, the mimeograph? Isn't
It was,
that what it was called way
yeah,
back? You gotta mimeograph the
there
copies.
were 1,000 monks sitting at tables writing it out in longhand. But mailing it out. So there were changes, obviously changes, and that meant the loss of careers for some people, for livelihoods, and there's no doubt about it. But it was a tool that was coming in at no point, and I think journalists have held out this, right, to the point where there are journalists everywhere. We can call ourselves. You are definitely a journalist. You're an editor and journalist. I am not. I'm at best a commentator on occasion around these things. But we've actually had a democratization of journalism with the tool that's happened, right?
Mhm.
In that area, there were 2 daily newspapers talking about occurrences in that community. There's probably thousands of people now doing the same thing on a daily basis. Is it good? Is it lots of noise? Of course it is. But it became a tool. And in fact, there are lots of people who look at computing similar, just the whole notion of computing as that great existential threat that came up. But we all realize this is a tool. We still need people to do our work. I want to put it in the context now of that for profit. Yeah, we're going to replace 3 people or replace 20 people with 3 people
Mhm.
into fundraising, where I think there's a moment. Yes, there will be some rationalization because this tool will be powerful. But I do think charities can say, but that relationship that you're talking about, the relationship between the donor and the organization, it becomes even more powerful and more an asset for the charity, because those donors will see all around them government agencies, for-profit agencies, driving them toward AI interactions. And here comes the charity saying, no, come on in. Let's have coffee. Let's chat. I'll give you a call. Maybe I'll write you a letter. And if we stick to our guns and say to ourselves in the charitable side of this, that the important thing is having people who are able to talk to other people directly on the phone, again, in person, through engagement that looks real and is indeed real. Now, if you're a large language model proponent, you're going to say, well, it'll get there soon, that it does seem that way. It'll never really feel that way if we kind of lean into it. And I do think that that will be in the short and medium term where charities can differentiate themselves, where you know if you put your gift into this organization, this for-profit organization, yes, you get a tax receipt, but what then happens afterwards? What kind of interaction are you going to have? you know you can make a charitable donation as a DAF for as little as $10,000. Will that be the last time you talk to someone directly about that $10,000 gift? If you're at a charity and you make a $10,000 donation, people are going to be calling you all the time. Maybe they don't even want that, but you're going to have that. And that will be the bespoke, if I can use that tailoring term, nature of how fundraising can differentiate itself. And the other conversation I had was with a couple that are, I think, if I can, they represent the notion that Malcolm Burrows talked about at the CAGP in Vancouver when he did his plenary session. Now, for those who don't know, Malcolm Burrows is the head of the Scotia Private Giving Foundation, often called the Aqueduct Foundation. And what he talked about, and this couple represents that, people who kind of came into the work world, baby boomers primarily, so 65 plus, started in the work world and were very fortunate to become wealthy from the work, had come really from nowhere and created a bunch of wealth. And what he said was those folks, and this is true of these two, this couple, a lot of them don't have actually a long history of philanthropy, don't give a lot, and don't feel connected with any sort of charity. And so they come to a meeting with their investment advisors and they say, I'd like to give to charity, or it might be good, advantageous giving from a tax perspective. And they don't have a charity of choice. So that's the moment. But you know what I found with this couple was that they want a charity of choice. They
Mhm.
want to engage. They don't want to just go to their bank and get a tax receipt. They want to make a difference in the world. And I think there are lots and lots of those folks. And what they're hearing from financial institutions is transaction. Oh, you want to make a gift? Oh, just give it to this and you'll get a transaction. Great. And you get a big tax receipt. And they focus on the tax receipt as opposed to focusing on the impact. And I do think there's a moment here where individuals talking to other individuals about impact will be the key to charities not winning the day by any chance, but definitely continuing to be super relevant. But it takes a commitment to people, and I'm not sure if you're seeing that part of it when you're talking to leaders who are engaged in writing articles for charity e-news. When you're talking to them, the commitment to people will be the commitment, I think, that will separate charities from the other folks in this space.
Yeah, and it's hard, because as a sector, we've been working so hard to not be perceived as like less than against what's happening in the government and in the public and private sector. There's always been this feeling that we are needing to professionalize more and needing to keep step with everything that's being done alongside. And I feel we tend to kind of hide our differences rather than lean into them, because our differences seem to make us, you know like the country bumpkin of what's going on with these financial transactions and in the world. uh, and the way we want to do it, the tools we want to use the phone. Well, who uses the phone anymore? Nobody makes calls, people text. So we're supposed to learn how to do digital and communicate those ways. Like, who goes and sits and has a tea or coffee? Who has time for that? They feel old fashioned and it feels out of step. Um, but I think that there is something to what you're saying about a commitment to people. At the end of the day, people want connection, people want community, people want conversations, people don't want to be lonely. They don't want to be just in their house scrolling. They want a neighbor to come and borrow a cup of sugar. They want to go out and walk around the neighborhood with 100 other people in support of a community housing, charity. People want to engage in the world around them. And there's just a real push pull happening right now with keeping in step with these technological developments that are happening at such a rapid pace. Everyone's head is spinning. It's not just the nonprofit sector. Those who I know who are part of the private sector are also wondering how to keep step and are amazed at what's happening. Like, it's really astounding. But it's a lot. So, um, I think it's hard sometimes for our leaders in the sector to take the stance that yes, we are first committed to people, beyond having all of the best technology in our office or having all the capabilities. It's not an easy announcement to make, even though in one sense it makes a lot of sense. It makes sense to align yourself that way because of the nature of philanthropy and what it's about. So I do. There's a struggle. People want to be taken seriously. They want to have those conversations and be able to say that we have all the savvy around the business side of things. but we're people,
Yeah,
like,
and I think you're hitting, right on the right marks here, because I think people want meaning.
yeah,
They want
they want
meaning in
meaning.
their lives. And this is part of developing that meaning. And look, Scott Galloway and his, you know, well-known American economist and also writer, author, podcaster, had just put a book out about boys and young
Yes.
men in the United States. And you and I, Lisa, have kids about the same age, and we know how
Mhm,
they've been affected by social media, and he's called out this fact that these young men and young and boys in the US are suffering right now. And
mhm,
he even brings it down. They're suffering from meaningful existence, essentially.
mhm,
Um, and it's because people rushed, as you say, rushed to include this technology into their to the work. But for me, I don't have any problem. I don't want to be considered a luddite. I'm somebody who, I just said, actually was at the forefront in some areas
mhm,
of bringing technology in. That's not a bad thing. It's worshiping the technology
mhm,
as though it has meaning, rather than it being right alongside the microwave, the toaster oven, the washer and dryer in your life. These are tools to make life better. Um, and they have, to a great degree. They have made life better for lots of people, and the work world's better. In a lot of ways, it's not, but it's better. But where charities can really lean in, where others in this space cannot, is the notion of meaning. We can
mhm,
provide through this interaction a community, a meaning, a partnership for something that's really, really profound. And we see this primarily not only in the religious organizations we work with, because you would assume that there's a meaning in there, but
yeah,
with a lot of the environmental organizations we work with, where people find this profound meaning in nature and the wilds that are Canada, and they see that as part of their meaning. So charities can see themselves as purveyors of that community, that meaningful existence, particularly with a certain group of the older generation that has all along the line felt a need to have community and meaning. Remember, these baby boomers are the ones in the 60s and 70s that started engaging with something that was more and broader in this way. So they're primed to hear this, and I feel that the great advantage charities have over all of the other sectors and all of the other types of endeavors is that they can provide this meaning, and they're going to do it best. And again, getting back to this CAGP world, with having really great people who can provide connection directly to them. Yes, it seems quaint to have a meeting until you find out everybody wants a meeting. It's
yeah,
quaint that to think about phone calls until you realize all your donors want to get on the call with you, or at least are happy that you're offering it.
mhm,
So I hear you loud and clear. This is the meaningful thing that we can lean into. And as long as leadership, and sometimes we have to manage up. I hear that a lot around our place anyway.
mhm,
That managing up to make sure that we feel we're leaning into that meaning rather than transaction is the thing that's going to really set apart some charities from others, because this will be a bit of a competition over the next little while, of how charities decide to implement it. Is it going to be a tool, or is it going to be the way we interact? And I think if it's the former, you're going to be really successful. If it's the latter, you're going to see yourself struggling. That's my feeling
yeah.
of the whole thing.
Well, and for those folks who maybe aren't familiar with CAGP, it's Canadian Association of Gift Planners. And for anyone who knows Ed, knows that, he's very experienced in all things to do with legacy giving and estate giving, and these are the types of conversations that I think you're hearkening back to, and creating that meaning around really about a life. And when you go back to that couple that you gave as an example, who had accumulated wealth through hard work and perhaps luck and circumstances, I don't believe that they don't care about where that hard earned wealth goes. I believe there's a story there, and I believe that it's just a matter of having the conversation and finding out what the story is, and making a connection. You know, it's um, we're emotional beings, you know, and it's emotion that drives philanthropy. It's emotion that, you know, drives people to support local charities, that make them create GoFundMe's, that make them, you know, schlep their kids around with their, you know, UNICEF boxes or pledge sheets or whatever it is. These are experiences and emotions. And I think we'd be doing ourselves a disservice if we just think that something like AI is is going to take all that away from us. I think we just need to retrench and revisit kind of what we're about, like you said, and it's about people and commitment to people. And attending a conference like the Canadian Association of Gift Planning Conference, where we get to actually have a lot of in-person discussions about these things and see people's reaction in a room, um, I always find is reassuring, actually, because it's easy to think that everyone else out there gets it, or that no one else has reservations about it, or that somebody else has all of the answers. And then you get in a room with people again, and you start to have the conversations, and you realize, no, they're thinking the way I'm thinking, and they have the same concerns, and they value the same things. And this is the power, this is the engine, the people engine that fuels kind of what we do.
Totally, totally. And I think, just kind of finish this off, because I do think this is an opportunity, to take
AI is an opportunity,
part of
or
me.
like AI is an opportunity, or what's the
I
what are you
think
referring
in the
to?
face of AI coming in,
Mm-hmm.
and it being the new fancy thing, that thing that, and I think you alluded to this, where in 5 years' time or less time, in a year's time, people are saying, you're not using the latest AI, what's wrong with you, right? And that's, that FOMO, that fear of missing out, that fear of being behind, that fear is what a lot of this is predicated upon, rather
Mm-hmm.
than my job as a fundraiser, our job as a charity is a human job. And, it's tools are not going to dictate who we are. It's a good example. I love to use this example. Some people really cherish their cars. And if you do out there, great. But you are not your car. you know you are
Right.
not. Your car might be super powerful and fast and shiny, but you might not be any of those things. You're a human being. And my point to that is, it's a human reality, it's a human world, and the product doesn't define you. And look, we've been fighting that for a while, right? The greatest definitional product that ever has appeared has been Macintosh products. You know, people judge you whether you have a Mac iPhone or not, whether you have the most updated iPhone, or some other kind of phone. There's decisions about you being made simply by what kind of phone you have. We have to get away from that. And with AI, are we using, you know, you can raise a lot of money with just a desk phone, right? If you know the right people to call. Okay. And so let's just be human, and let's lean into the humanity of who we are, but also the causes that we represent. I think that for me is a decision, though, Lisa. And I think that's why I brought this up.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be decision making that's happening over the course of the next few months, and next couple of years, which will be how do we institute this, and there'll be a rush to that. And it's going to be a foregone conclusion that's going to replace it. It's like, how do we make this a useful tool for the work that we need to do? Put the work first. It's at the core of this, and the people who help us. Then the rest of it's easy.
I agree, and I'm just gonna add one little thing because it you tweaked me right there, and then I know it's time to wrap. But this is what happens when we just have a good conversation. That whole idea, and in our sector, that when something new comes in, whatever is old gets tossed completely aside. And I have seen it happen multiple times, not only with organizations I worked for, but adjacent organizations. And the example I'll use is database. So
Yeah.
so an organization is using a database because this is technology related, and it has not been used effectively. It has not been used consistently. It has not had rules applied to it. So of course it is not delivering on what they need that database to do. So what did they do? Instead of going back, retrenching, retraining, figuring it out, they actually get rid of that database and start with something new. Maybe they even get someone to build them a database because they think customization is what is needed. That was the problem with
Hmm.
what had happened before. So they just start all over again without really looking clearly at what the issues were that were driving the problem to begin with. This could happen again with AI. If people just decide, well, all the old processes, they must not work anymore. So it has to be AI driven. We're going to start everything new. My God, then, no wonder we're resource strapped. No wonder people don't have time to get to all of their things. So there really has to be intentionality to making these kind of moves. It is leader driven. Leaders in the organization need to take a position. They need to be strategic and include their teams, and that's how it's going to happen with success, especially with keeping our mission as the foundational driver behind it. So I'm optimistic, but our track record isn't great in this area.
Be
So
optimistic. Be optimistic.
I
Trust our
will.
people. Trust the people in this business. I always do. It's always worked out.
That's a great note to take a break on, and then let's come back and do our feel good wrap ups with who we are giving a shout out to this week. Sound good, Ed?
Sounds great.
Okay, we'll be right back. All right, here we are back with um, perspectives on Canadian fundraising, and we're here to do our Let's Be Charitable wrap up. So, right in tune with what we've been talking about today, Ed. And coincidentally, it has again to do with CAGP. If you remember when Peggy Colleen joined us, she was talking, she's part of the CAGP Foundation, and I had made a commitment to Peggy that I would make a donation to the foundation, which I did. And I got a phone call today
Ah,
from a member of the foundation to thank me. Someone picked up the phone. It wasn't an email, it wasn't a text. It was a live person on the other end who got my name right, thanked me for my contribution. We had a brief minute conversation, and it was lovely. It was absolutely lovely. So I'm going to give a shout out for the CAGP putting their money where their mouth is in terms of their fundraising and creating that donor connection, because I experienced it today.
that's great. Yeah, that's great. And my let's be charitable moment is to another group of people. I saw some of them last week at an event, and there'll be more this week. Lisa, when we're at the CAGP, Canadian Association of Gift Planners conference, there'll be various events across the country in the coming few months. And I know we've talked about volunteers, and multiple times during this podcast over the last few months, but the volunteers who put on these events in various cities at various times, um, I think that you and I are going to go and have a really productive and probably a good time at the Canadian Association of Gift Planners event. And those
Mhm.
volunteers who've worked a full year putting it all together will get a nice ovation after putting
Right.
in hours of time at a time, particularly after COVID, where we didn't even know where we would be with these sorts of pardon me, these sorts of events. And just given
Yeah.
what we talked about today, when it comes to community, gathering, being human, being together, feeling part of something, they're driving forward this activity. And it's unseen a lot of the times. Yes, volunteers who raise a lot of money, that's really seen. Volunteers that raise community, that's harder to show. So to all the AFP, the AHP, the CAGP, all of the other chapter and national volunteers. Congratulations and thanks so much. Lisa and I are going to have a great time in Winnipeg in a couple of days. And it's all because of the hard work that you've put in.
We sure are. So thank you for listening and joining us for Let's Get Real Perspectives on Fundraising in Canada. Ed and I are so happy that you could
You
join
bet.
us for
You
our
bet.
little tete-a-tete. And sometimes, a lot of times, we have these conversations between takes, but today you just got the kind of unfiltered version of what's on our mind. So, Ed, it's been a pleasure. I'll look forward to seeing you in person soon. And to our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. Until
Thanks so
next
much.
time.
All right. Thanks, guys.